The radio crackled to life at 3:47 hours, shattering the pre-dawn silence of Bagram Air Base. Mayday, Mayday, this is Reaper 6-1. We're taking heavy fire. Request immediate close air support, over. The voice belonged to Chief Petty Officer Marcus Kane, a SEAL team leader whose reputation preceded him through every special operations corridor from Virginia Beach to Afghanistan. What he didn't know was that his salvation would come from the most unlikely source, a pilot the entire squadron had written off as a liability. Captain Zara Ghost Kozlowski sat alone in the ready room, her flight suit crisp despite the early hour. The other pilots had stopped inviting her to poker games months ago. They'd stopped making eye contact in the mess hall. The whispers followed her everywhere. Too cautious, too methodical, couldn't make the hard calls when it mattered. Her last mission had ended with a successful strike on target, but she'd taken 47 minutes to engage, 47 minutes of circling, calculating, verifying coordinates, while Marines waited below. The mission commander had called it textbook execution. The Marines had called it something else entirely. The klaxon shrieked through the hangar as scramble orders echoed across the loudspeakers. All available aircraft, immediate response required, coordinates follow. Zara was already moving, her boots striking concrete with mechanical precision. She'd been ready for hours, studying weather patterns, reviewing tactical approaches, memorizing every ridge and valley within a 100-mile radius. The other pilots thought she was paranoid. She called it preparation. Her F-16C Fighting Falcon waited in the dim hangar light, engines already spinning up. The crew chief, Staff Sergeant Rivera, gave her a tight nod. He was one of the few who still looked her in the eye. "Weather's turning nasty up there, Captain. Visibility near zero in the target area." Zara checked her instruments methodically, each switch and gauge receiving the same careful attention. "Copy that, Sergeant. She ready to fly." Rivera patted the aircraft's nose. "Always is for you, ma'am." As Zara taxied toward the runway, her radio filled with chatter from other aircraft launching into the storm. Major Hammer Davidson's voice cut through the static. "Ghost, stay high and provide overwatch. We'll handle the close support." The dismissal in his tone was unmistakable. Even in a crisis, they expected her to hang back, to play it safe. But 6 miles away, in a canyon that didn't appear on any standard tactical map, 12 Navy SEALs were pinned down by an enemy force that had turned their extraction point into a killing field. They had maybe 20 minutes before dawn exposed their position completely. 20 minutes before the mission became a body recovery operation. And the only pilot crazy enough to thread an F-16 through a canyon in zero visibility was the one everyone thought didn't have the courage to take risks. The mission was about to prove them all catastrophically wrong. Zara's F-16 climbed through thick cloud cover, her heads-up display painting a ghostly green picture of the Afghan mountains below. The coordinates led to the Korangal Valley, a maze of granite walls and Taliban strongholds that had earned the nickname Valley of Death from every American unit unfortunate enough to patrol its depths. The weather briefing had mentioned scattered storms, but the reality was far worse. A wall of precipitation that turned the mountains into an impenetrable gray void. "Ghost, Hammer lead, what's your position?" Major Davidson's voice carried the weight of command, but Zara detected something else underneath: uncertainty. His flight of 4 F-16s was stacked at 15,000 feet, safely above the weather but effectively blind to anything happening in the canyon below. "Ghost is level 20,000, approaching target area," Zara replied, her voice steady as she studied the moving map display. The SEAL team's GPS beacon showed as a tiny blue dot surrounded by hostile red markers. The tactical picture was clear. Reaper 6-1 was trapped in a natural amphitheater with enemy positions on 3 sides and a sheer cliff at their backs. Staff Sergeant Rivera's voice crackled through her headset from the maintenance frequency. "Captain, I've been thinking about that modification we discussed. Your targeting pod has been recalibrated for low-altitude operations." He paused. 30-foot minimum, if you're wondering." Zara understood immediately. Rivera had quietly upgraded her aircraft systems based on her obsessive training regimen. While other pilots practiced high-altitude bombing runs, she'd spent countless hours in the simulator, flying nap-of-the-earth profiles through digital mountain ranges. The other pilots had mocked her dedication to what they considered an obsolete skill in an era of precision-guided munitions. Reaper 6-1, this is Ghost. I'm your close air support. Send your situation report. Her voice cut through the radio chatter with quiet authority. Kane's response was immediate. Ghost, we've got approximately 40 Taliban fighters with heavy machine guns and RPGs positioned along the canyon rim. Our LZ is compromised, and we've got wounded. We need immediate suppression of enemy positions, but the ceiling is maybe 50 feet. Nobody can get down here. Above the clouds, Major Davidson was coordinating with headquarters. Control, weather is below minimums for close air support. Recommend alternate extraction method. The pragmatic response of a career officer who understood acceptable risk versus mission requirements. Zara began her descent, watching altimeter readings drop through the gray soup. At 5,000 feet, she broke through the cloud base, and suddenly the world exploded into sharp relief. Jagged peaks thrust up through the mist like broken teeth, and directly ahead, a narrow canyon carved deep into the mountainside. Her radar warning receiver remained silent. The Taliban fighters below had no idea death was descending toward them through the storm. The canyon walls rushed past Zara's cockpit at impossible speed, granite faces streaked with ice and shadow mere feet from her wingtips. Her airspeed indicator showed 450 knots as she threaded the F-16 through a gap that seemed designed for helicopters, not fighter jets. The mathematical precision required was staggering. Every control input calculated to the millimeter. Every adjustment based on wind patterns she'd memorized from weather reports dating back 6 months. Jesus Christ, Ghost, is that you down here? Kane's voice carried a mixture of disbelief and desperate hope. From his position wedged between boulders, the SEAL could hear jet engines echoing off canyon walls in a way that defied physics. Zara's targeting pod painted infrared signatures across her display, clusters of human heat sources positioned along the canyon rim in textbook ambush formation. The enemy had chosen their ground well, interlocking fields of fire with natural cover and multiple escape routes. Against conventional air support operating from safe altitudes, the position would have been nearly impregnable. Reaper 6-1, I have visual on multiple hostile positions. Stand by for gun runs. Zara's thumb moved to the weapon selector, cycling to her 20 cannon. Precision-guided munitions were useless at this altitude and airspeed. This would be old-school aerial gunnery, the kind practiced by fighter pilots in wars her grandfather had fought. Above the cloud deck, Major Davidson was attempting to coordinate from 15,000 feet. Ghost, pull up and establish orbit at safe altitude. We'll guide in precision strikes from overhead. His tactical training demanded positive target identification and measured response, but those protocols assumed weather conditions that allowed for careful observation. Negative, hammer lead. I'm engaged in close air support, Zara replied, her voice clinical as she rolled inverted to align with her first target. Through her canopy, she could see muzzle flashes from Taliban positions as they poured fire into the SEAL team's hiding places. The first gun run was poetry written in physics and violence. Zara rolled her F-16 into a 60-degree dive, the aircraft's nose pointing directly at a machine gun nest carved into the canyon wall. Her targeting reticle steadied on the infrared signature as she squeezed the trigger. The cannon's distinctive buzz filled her headset as 675 rounds per minute tore through the air, each depleted uranium projectile finding its mark with surgical precision. The Taliban position simply ceased to exist, replaced by a cloud of dust and debris. But Zara was already pulling hard left, using the canyon walls to mask her approach to the next target. G-forces pressed her deep into her ejection seat as she maneuvered in airspace that measured barely 200 feet across. Kane's radio call confirmed what Zara could see on her targeting display. Ghost, direct hit on the eastern position. You've got their attention now. They're shifting fire to track you. The tactical situation had shifted. Instead of 12 SEALs pinned down by overwhelming firepower, the Taliban now faced a fighter pilot who had turned their carefully planned ambush into a deadly game of three-dimensional chess played at 400 miles per hour. Tracers began arcing across the canyon as Taliban fighters attempted to engage the F-16 with small arms fire. The futility of their effort was almost comical. Trying to hit a fighter jet with assault rifles was like throwing rocks at lightning. But Zara knew that luck could be as dangerous as skill, and one well-placed shot could end everything. She pulled her aircraft into a knife-edge turn that scraped paint from the canyon wall, feeling the F-16 respond like an extension of her will. The second gun run targeted a cluster of fighters attempting to flank the SEAL position from the north. Her cannon found them in the open, exposed on a narrow ledge with nowhere to hide. The radio frequency erupted with voices as word of the engagement spread through the tactical network. "Control, this is Hammer Lead. I have a pilot conducting close air support in 00 weather conditions." Major Davidson's report carried undertones of professional concern mixed with grudging amazement. Far below, Chief Kane pressed himself against cold granite and listened to the sound of salvation screaming through the canyon walls. He'd called for air support expecting the usual procedure, aircraft circling high overhead, dropping bombs with clinical precision from safe distances. Instead, he'd received something that seemed to violate every law of military aviation: a fighter pilot willing to fly into hell itself to pull his team out. Zara's third pass targeted the largest concentration of enemy fighters, a group that had taken cover in a natural cave formation on the canyon's western wall. As she rolled in for the attack, her threat warning system detected movement below. Someone was shouldering an RPG launcher, attempting to time her approach. The mathematical calculation was instantaneous. Trajectory, airspeed, weapons envelope, and escape vector all processed in the span of a heartbeat. Zara triggered her cannon early, walking the rounds into the cave mouth just as the RPG launched. The rocket-propelled grenade streaked past her aircraft with barely 10 feet of separation, its warhead exploding harmlessly against the far canyon wall. But the real victory was what happened next. The remaining Taliban fighters, witnessing an American pilot destroy their positions with surgical precision while flying at treetop level through impossible weather, began abandoning their positions. The psychological impact of the attack was devastating. They'd never faced an adversary who combined such technical skill with apparent disregard for personal safety. Reaper 6-1, I'm counting multiple enemy personnel fleeing north along the canyon floor, Zara reported, her voice still carrying that same clinical calm despite having just cheated death by inches. The tide of battle had turned in less than 4 minutes. Kane keyed his radio with hands that weren't quite steady. "Ghost, this is Reaper 6-1. Enemy positions are neutralized. Repeat, enemy positions are neutralized. You just saved 12 American lives." His voice carried something rarely heard from veteran SEALs: genuine awe. Zara pulled her F-16 into a climbing turn, finally clearing the canyon walls and entering the relative safety of open airspace. Her fuel gauge showed she had maybe 20 minutes before bingo fuel, but the immediate crisis was over. The SEALs could now establish a secure perimeter and wait for helicopter extraction once the weather cleared. Ghost, Hammer Lead, climbed to 15,000 for debrief. Major Davidson's voice had changed subtly. The dismissive tone from earlier had been replaced by something approaching respect, though professional military courtesy demanded he maintain command authority. As Zara climbed through the cloud deck, she reflected on the irony of the situation. For months, her fellow pilots had questioned her courage, her ability to make split-second decisions under pressure. They'd seen her methodical approach to mission planning as evidence of fear rather than preparation. But when the moment came, when 12 American lives hung in the balance, all that preparation had distilled into 4 minutes of perfect execution. Her radio crackled with traffic from the Joint Operations Center as word of the engagement spread through the command structure. Any station, this is control, request confirmation that close air support was conducted in weather below minimums. The bureaucratic mind seeking to understand how standard operating procedures had been so dramatically exceeded. Staff Sergeant Rivera's voice cut through the chatter on the maintenance frequency. "Captain, I'm showing all systems normal. How did she handle down there?" His question carried paternal pride in an aircraft he'd personally fine-tuned for exactly this type of mission. "Like a scalpel, Sergeant, like a scalpel." Below, as Zara's F-16 disappeared into the clouds, Chief Kane gathered his team for the move to alternate extraction coordinates. Several of his men looked up at the gray sky with expressions typically reserved for religious experiences. They'd witnessed something that would become legend in SEAL team bars from Coronado to Norfolk, a fighter pilot who'd flown through hell itself to bring them home. The mission was over, but the story was just beginning. In military aviation, reputation is built on moments when skill, courage, and preparation converge under impossible circumstances. Zara Ghost Kozlowski had just authored one of those moments, and the reverberations would ripple through the special operations community for years to come. Word traveled fast through Bagram's operational channels. By the time Zara taxied her F-16 back to the hangar, a small crowd had gathered on the flight line. Staff Sergeant Rivera was waiting with a bottle of water and a satisfied grin that spoke volumes about vindicated faith in both pilot and aircraft. Major Davidson emerged from the operations center, his flight helmet tucked under his arm and his expression carefully neutral. Behind him walked Colonel Sarah Chen, the squadron commander, whose reputation for ice-cold professionalism was matched only by her intolerance for unnecessary risk-taking. The convergence of senior leadership suggested that Zara's canyon run had attracted attention far beyond the tactical level. "Captain Kozlowski," Davidson began, his voice carrying formal authority, "we need to discuss your engagement parameters." The words were carefully chosen, not quite a reprimand but definitely not praise. In military aviation, pushing aircraft performance beyond established limits typically resulted in extensive paperwork and uncomfortable conversations with safety officers. Zara removed her helmet methodically, her dark hair damp with perspiration despite the morning cold. "Yes, sir. Engagement was conducted within aircraft capabilities and mission parameters." Her response was textbook, acknowledging the implicit question while maintaining that all actions had been appropriate given the circumstances. Colonel Chen stepped forward, studying Zara with the intensity of someone accustomed to reading character in high-stress situations. "Captain, I've reviewed the preliminary mission reports. Your aircraft telemetry shows minimum altitude of 32 feet and maximum G-loading of 7.8. These parameters are aggressive." The pause was deliberate, allowing time for the implications to settle. From across the flight line, other pilots began filtering toward the hangar. Lieutenant Joker Martinez, who'd never missed an opportunity to question Zara's tactical decisions, walked with unusual quiet. Captain Tom Blade Harrison, whose call sign reflected his reputation for cutting through complex problems with decisive action, nodded respectfully as he passed. The shift in atmosphere was subtle but unmistakable. Peer judgment in military aviation was harsh and immediate. Pilots either had the skills to handle extreme situations, or they didn't. There was no middle ground, no participation trophies, no second chances when lives hung in the balance. Zara had just demonstrated conclusively which category she occupied. Rivera approached with maintenance logs tucked under his arm. "Colonel, if I may, Captain Kozlowski's aircraft has been specifically configured for low-altitude operations, Every modification was documented and approved through proper channels. His intervention was carefully worded but unmistakably supportive. Colonel Chen's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. "Sergeant, are you telling me this engagement was planned?" The question carried implications that extended far beyond immediate tactical considerations. "No, ma'am," Zara interjected quickly. "But I've been training for contingencies that might require non-standard approaches. Today's mission simply required executing those procedures under operational conditions." The radio in Davidson's flight suit crackled with an incoming message. "Hammer lead, this is Control. Chief Kane requests immediate communication with pilot call sign Ghost, Priority Alpha." The formality of the request suggested official recognition rather than casual gratitude. As the group walked toward the operations center, Zara caught sight of her reflection in the hangar's aluminum siding. The pilot looking back appeared unchanged. Same regulation flight suit, same precise bearing, same methodical attention to detail that had earned her so much criticism. But something fundamental had shifted in the space between sunrise and that moment. She was no longer the pilot who couldn't make hard decisions under pressure. She was the pilot who'd saved 12 lives by flying through impossible conditions with mathematical precision. The transformation was complete, irreversible, and absolutely terrifying in its implications. Because now everyone would expect her to be that pilot, every single time. The operations center buzzed with controlled activity as shift changes brought fresh personnel to monitor ongoing missions across the theater. Zara found herself seated at a conference table that had hosted countless tactical debriefs, but this felt different. Less interrogation, more documentation for posterity. Chief Kane's voice filled the room through secure video link from his temporary position. "Ma'am, I've got 22 years in special operations, and I've never seen flying like that. Your aircraft came through weather that grounded every helicopter on the base, then conducted precision strikes in a canyon that our maps listed as impassable." His weathered face carried the gravity of someone who understood exactly what had transpired. Colonel Chen made notes on a tablet while Kane spoke, but her attention remained fixed on Zara. "Chief, what was your assessment of pilot performance under combat conditions?" The question was formal, part of official after-action reporting, but the answer would carry weight far beyond immediate documentation. "Colonel, with respect, that pilot saved 12 American lives by flying through conditions that should have been impossible. My team is alive because someone was willing to execute a mission that required perfect skill and—" Kane paused, searching for appropriate military terminology, "and courage that goes beyond normal tactical requirements." Major Davidson leaned forward in his chair. "Captain Kozlowski, walk us through your decision-making process. What made you believe this engagement was feasible?" His tone had evolved from skeptical to genuinely curious, a professional pilot seeking to understand how a colleague had achieved something that violated conventional wisdom. Zara opened the tactical folder she'd carried from her aircraft, revealing detailed charts covered with handwritten annotations. "Sir, I've been studying this valley system for 6 months. Weather patterns, terrain features, enemy tactical preferences, optimal approach vectors for various engagement scenarios." She traced routes along topographical lines with precise finger movements. "This morning's situation matched parameters I'd already analyzed." The room fell silent as the implications became clear. While other pilots had focused on high-altitude precision bombing and beyond visual range engagements, Zara had quietly prepared for scenarios that seemed obsolete in an era of advanced technology. Her methodical nature, the trait that had earned so much criticism, had actually been systematic preparation for exactly this type of mission. Lieutenant Colonel Mike Viking Anderson, the wing's operations officer, spoke for the first time. "Captain, are you telling us you've been developing low-altitude strike protocols independently?" His question carried professional interest mixed with administrative concern about unauthorized training activities. "No, sir," Zara replied carefully. "I've been studying terrain and weather patterns in our area of operations, then conducting simulator training to develop contingency responses, all documented in my personal training logs and submitted through proper channels." Rivera cleared his throat diplomatically. "Colonel, I can confirm that Captain Kozlowski has logged more simulator hours than any pilot in the squadron. She's been requesting aircraft modifications and running diagnostic tests on low-altitude performance parameters for months." The pieces clicked together with mathematical precision. Zara hadn't simply improvised her way through an impossible mission. She'd engineered the capability to accomplish it through months of dedicated preparation that others had dismissed as obsessive behavior. Colonel Chen closed her tablet with a definitive snap. "Captain, I'm recommending you for the Distinguished Flying Cross. Your actions today represent the finest traditions of military aviation." She paused, studying Zara's reaction to the announcement. "But more importantly, I want you to brief the entire wing on your preparation methodology. If we're going to operate in this environment, we need pilots who think beyond conventional parameters." The transformation was complete. In the span of a morning, Zara had evolved from squadron outcast to tactical innovator, from overly cautious pilot to someone whose excessive preparation had saved lives when conventional approaches failed. As the debrief concluded and personnel began filtering back to their duties, Davidson approached Zara privately. "For what it's worth, I owe you an apology. I thought your training regimen was—" He searched for diplomatic language. "Unorthodox. Turns out it was exactly what the mission required." Outside, Bagram's flight operations continued their relentless rhythm, but something fundamental had shifted in the squadron's dynamic. The pilot they'd once considered too careful had proven that true courage often looks like meticulous preparation, meeting impossible circumstances. And in special operations units across Afghanistan, word was spreading about a fighter pilot with the call sign Ghost, who could make F-16s do things that defied physics and convention alike. 3 weeks later, the legend had taken on a life of its own. Stories of Ghost's Canyon Run had spread through military networks with the velocity of digital wildfire, each retelling adding layers of mythic detail to an already extraordinary truth. SEAL teams requested her specifically for close air support missions. Marine units mentioned her call sign with the same reverence typically reserved for Medal of Honor recipients. But for Zara, the most significant change was the silence that had replaced the whispers. No more sideways glances in the mess hall, no more exclusion from informal pilot gatherings, no more subtle questioning of her tactical judgment. The respect was gratifying, but it carried a weight she hadn't anticipated. The pressure of reputation earned through a single perfect moment under impossible circumstances. Her training regimen had intensified rather than relaxed. Each morning found her in the simulator before dawn, flying increasingly complex scenarios through digital terrain that pushed both aircraft and pilot to absolute limits. Rivera had become her unofficial partner in this obsession, fine-tuning aircraft systems with the dedication of a master craftsman preparing his tools for perfection. "Captain, you've got another priority tasking," announced Lieutenant Martinez as he entered the ready room. The same pilot who'd once questioned her aggressiveness now delivered mission assignments with unmistakable respect. Special Operations wants Ghost specifically for a high-risk extraction in the Korangal. The irony wasn't lost on Zara. The Valley system where she'd first proven herself had become her specialty, her domain of expertise that no other pilot could match. Each mission built upon the last, creating a tactical knowledge base that transformed dangerous terrain into familiar neighborhoods where she could operate with surgical precision. Colonel Chen appeared in the doorway, her expression carrying the weight of command decisions that extended far beyond immediate tactical considerations. "Captain, I need to discuss your next assignment. Pentagon's interested in your low-altitude strike protocols. They want you to develop training curriculum for advanced combat scenarios. The offer represented everything Zara had never imagined wanting: recognition, career advancement, the opportunity to influence tactical doctrine at the highest levels. But it also meant leaving operational flying for the world of conference rooms and PowerPoint presentations, trading the cockpit for a classroom. "Ma'am, with respect, I'd prefer to remain operational," Zara replied without hesitation. "There are pilots and ground units who might need capabilities I've developed." The response was instinctive, reflecting priorities that had crystallized during that 4-minute engagement in conditions that should have been impossible. Chen studied her with the intensity of someone accustomed to reading character under pressure. "Captain, your tactical innovations could save hundreds of lives if integrated into standard training protocols. That's bigger than any individual mission." The argument was compelling, logical, aligned with traditional military career progression. But Zara had learned something about herself in that Afghan canyon that couldn't be quantified in efficiency reports or promotion boards. She wasn't built for institutional influence or bureaucratic impact. She was built for moments when mathematical precision and absolute commitment converged to save lives that would otherwise be lost. "Colonel, respectfully request to remain with squadron operations," she said quietly. "I think I can do more good right here." The decision would define the remainder of her military career, but in that moment it felt as inevitable as physics itself. Some pilots were meant to reshape doctrine from behind mahogany desks. Others were meant to fly through impossible weather into canyons that existed beyond the edge of acceptable risk. Zara had discovered she belonged to the second category, and no amount of career advancement could compete with the mathematical purity of perfect execution under conditions that demanded everything she could give. As Chen left to report her decision up the chain of command, Zara returned to studying topographical charts with the same methodical intensity that had saved 12 lives and earned her a reputation that would outlast her military service. Outside, afternoon thunderstorms were building over the Hindu Kush Mountains, creating weather conditions that would ground conventional aircraft operations. But for a pilot who'd learned to treat impossible circumstances as simply another variable in complex equations, the approaching storms represented nothing more than an interesting tactical challenge. 6 months after the canyon run, Zara's reputation had evolved from legend to tactical doctrine. Her name appeared in classified training manuals, her techniques were studied at military academies, and her call sign had become synonymous with precision flying under impossible conditions. But the transformation that mattered most was internal. She discovered the exact intersection where her obsessive preparation met operational necessity. The morning briefing revealed another high-priority mission. A reconnaissance team trapped in the Tora Bora cave complex needed immediate extraction before weather systems made helicopter operations impossible for the next 72 hours. The terrain was even more challenging than her original canyon run: vertical cliff faces, intersecting valleys, and enemy positions integrated into natural defensive formations. "Ghost, this one's voluntary," announced Major Davidson, now speaking with the deference typically reserved for subject matter experts. "Weather's below minimums for standard operations, terrains designated no-fly for fixed-wing aircraft, and enemy forces are concentrated in overlapping defensive positions." He paused, studying her reaction. "Command understands if you assess this as non-feasible." The careful phrasing acknowledged what everyone in the room understood. Zara had earned the right to select her own missions based on professional judgment rather than simple orders. Her tactical expertise in extreme conditions had become too valuable to risk on assignments that fell within normal operational parameters. She studied the mission folder with characteristic intensity, noting elevation changes, weather patterns, enemy force estimates, and extraction timeline requirements. The mathematical complexity was staggering, dozens of variables that had to align perfectly for mission success. A single calculation error, one moment of imperfect execution, would result in aircraft loss and crew fatality. "Sir, mission is feasible with acceptable risk parameters," she announced after several minutes of analysis. The response carried quiet confidence earned through repeated success under conditions that had initially seemed impossible. Rivera appeared with her personal equipment bag, already conducting pre-flight preparations based on mission requirements he'd anticipated from weather reports and tactical intelligence. Their partnership had evolved into something approaching telepathy, each understanding the other's requirements without need for extensive communication. As Zara walked toward her aircraft, she passed other pilots preparing for routine missions in conventional airspace. Their conversations carried the easy camaraderie of professionals working within established parameters, handling challenges that demanded skill but not perfection. She envied their simplicity while recognizing her own calling lay elsewhere. Her F-16 waited in the dim hangar light, engines already spinning up for what would become another legendary mission. But Zara no longer thought in terms of legend or reputation. She thought in terms of 12 Americans who needed extraction, weather systems that created specific tactical opportunities, and aircraft capabilities that could be precisely matched to mission requirements. The mathematical purity of the challenge was intoxicating, not because of the risk, but because of the precision required to minimize that risk while achieving mission success. She discovered that courage wasn't about ignoring danger, but about calculating exactly how much risk was acceptable to save lives that couldn't be saved any other way. As her F-16 lifted off into deteriorating weather conditions, Zara felt the familiar convergence of preparation, opportunity, and absolute necessity that defined her operational existence. Below, 12 Americans waited for extraction that conventional wisdom deemed impossible. In 60 minutes, they'd learned that impossible was simply another word for insufficiently prepared. The mission clock showed 58 minutes remaining when Zara's F-16 dropped below the cloud deck, and the Tora Bora complex materialized through her targeting systems like a three-dimensional chess puzzle carved from granite and violence. The reconnaissance team's GPS beacon pulsed from a cave entrance halfway up a near-vertical cliff face, surrounded by enemy positions that controlled every conceivable approach route. "Viper 7-7, this is Ghost. I have visual on your position," she transmitted, her voice carrying the calm precision that had become her operational signature. "Understand you need immediate extraction with 12 personnel and sensitive equipment." Staff Sergeant Jake Morrison's response crackled through heavy static. "Ghost, thank God. We've been pinned down for 18 hours, ammunition running low, and weather's getting worse by the hour." His voice carried the exhaustion of a veteran soldier who'd pushed beyond normal endurance limits. "But Ghost, I gotta tell you, there's no way anybody can get in here. Terrain's impossible, and we've got concentrated machine gun positions covering every approach." Through her heads-up display, Zara could see the tactical problem in stark mathematical terms. The cave entrance was positioned 800 feet above the valley floor, accessible only by helicopter under perfect conditions. But approaching helicopters would be exposed to enemy fire from elevated positions for nearly 2 minutes before reaching the extraction point, a death sentence under current circumstances. The conventional solution was obvious: establish an expanded perimeter using precision munitions, clear enemy positions through systematic bombardment, then coordinate helicopter extraction once the threat was neutralized. Estimated timeline, 4 to 6 hours. Problem: weather systems would make helicopter operations impossible within 2 hours. "Viper 7-7, I'm going to clear your immediate area, then mark a landing zone for helicopter extraction," Zara announced. What she didn't transmit was the unconventional nature of her intended approach. a gun run that would require flying directly up the cliff face at minimum altitude, engaging multiple targets while maintaining precise aircraft control in turbulent conditions. Her first pass targeted the machine gun nest that controlled the primary approach route. Rolling inverted to align with the cliff face, Zara pushed her F-16 into a 90-degree climb that turned the aircraft into a vertical missile, streaking up the granite wall. The targeting reticle settled on the enemy position just as her cannon found range, devastating the fortified position with surgical precision. But the real innovation was her escape vector. Instead of pulling away from the cliff face, she continued the vertical climb until clearing the ridgeline, then rolled into a knife-edge turn that used the mountain peak to mask her aircraft from remaining enemy positions. The maneuver was aerodynamically demanding and tactically brilliant, allowing her to engage multiple targets while minimizing exposure time. Ghost, Jesus Christ, that was incredible. Morrison's voice carried amazement mixed with professional appreciation. You just took out their primary gun position by flying straight up the cliff face. I've never seen anything like it. 3 more passes cleared the remaining defensive positions, each attack executed with mathematical precision that turned the F-16 into an instrument of tactical surgery. By the time Zara pulled off target, the cliff face had been transformed from an impregnable defensive position into a secure landing zone. 20 minutes later, a Marine Corps CH-53 lifted off with 12 rescued personnel and intelligence materials that would influence operational planning for months. But for Zara, the satisfaction came from solving another impossible equation, matching aircraft capabilities to mission requirements with precision that left no margin for error. As she climbed toward friendly airspace, her radio filled with congratulations from pilots who'd monitored the engagement. But the voice that mattered most came from Rivera. "Captain, aircraft performed flawlessly. She's ready for whatever comes next." And they both knew something would come next, because impossible missions had become Zara's specialty in a theater where conventional approaches often failed. The debriefing took place in a classified conference room where senior officers studied gun camera footage that would fundamentally change tactical aviation doctrine. Colonel Chen watched the vertical cliff assault for the 3rd time, her expression shifting between professional admiration and bureaucratic concern about precedents being established outside normal operational parameters. "Captain Kozlowski," she began carefully, "your tactics are effective, but they're also creating expectations that may not be sustainable across broader pilot populations." The statement carried implications that extended far beyond immediate mission success. If Ghost's techniques became standard requirements, most pilots would fail to meet operational demands. Zara understood the dilemma. Her obsessive preparation and natural affinity for extreme precision flying couldn't be replicated through standard training protocols. What worked for her might prove impossible for pilots with different skill sets or psychological profiles. Yet the results were undeniable. Missions accomplished that would otherwise have been written off as acceptable losses. "Ma'am, I'm not suggesting these techniques become standard procedures," she replied diplomatically. "But there are scenarios where conventional approaches simply don't work. Having pilots who can operate outside normal parameters provides commanders with additional options." Major Davidson nodded slowly. "The question is whether we're creating tactical capabilities or just building an entire operational philosophy around one pilot's unique abilities." His concern was practical. What happened to critical missions when Ghost wasn't available? The answer came from an unexpected source. Lieutenant Martinez raised his hand hesitantly. "Sir, if I may, Captain Kozlowski has been offering additional training sessions for pilots interested in advanced maneuvering techniques. Several of us have been participating, and while we can't match her precision, we're definitely expanding our operational envelopes." This was news to senior leadership. Apparently, Zara had been conducting informal training programs without bureaucratic oversight, gradually building a cadre of pilots with enhanced low-altitude capabilities. The grassroots nature of the development was both encouraging and concerning from an institutional perspective. Colonel Chen studied her tablet, reviewing training records and mission reports that painted a picture of tactical innovation occurring at the squadron level. "Captain, how many pilots have participated in this additional training?" The question carried administrative weight. Unofficial training programs created liability issues and needed formal oversight. 8 pilots have completed basic courses. 3 have achieved intermediate certification on simulator scenarios, Zara replied. All training documented in personal logs and conducted during off-duty hours using available aircraft and simulator resources. The revelation shifted the entire discussion. Instead of dealing with a single pilot's unique capabilities, they were looking at the foundation of an advanced tactical program that could be scaled and institutionalized. Ghost's individual brilliance was becoming the seed for broader operational transformation. "Captain, I want you to formalize this training program," Chen announced. "Develop curriculum, establish certification standards, and create a pipeline for advanced tactical capabilities. But you maintain operational status. We're going to need your skills while you're building these capabilities in others." The assignment represented everything Zara had instinctively avoided: institutional responsibility, administrative oversight, the transformation from tactical operator to training specialist. But it also offered something unprecedented: the opportunity to create systemic change while remaining operationally relevant. "Yes, ma'am," she replied, understanding that her career had just taken another unexpected turn. "I'll develop a comprehensive program that maintains safety standards while expanding tactical capabilities." As the